pleasant day to all of us. My name is Mary Angeline Pagran Bompet, and I'm going to discuss all about the different education systems in the Eastern world. So first, let me tackle our objectives for today. So at the end of this lesson, each students are expected to distinguish the various types of education systems in the Eastern world. The students will have additional gathered knowledge with accordance to the differences and similarities of the education systems in the Eastern world. So before we start, I'm going to ask a question. What is an education system, DI? So an education system is an arrangement that consists of at least one teacher and one student in a context. So education system must be intentional, where a teacher actively attempts to guide student learning. So education systems encompass all institutions that are concerned with educating students who are in K-12 and higher education. So for students, the education system encompasses elementary education, middle school, high school, and then college or university. So what is the learning approach of the Eastern education system? So the Eastern education is based on the imperative teaching method. So what is this? So imperative teaching method involves project-based learning and interdisciplinary programs which is directed for educators towards attaining objectives with standardized curriculum, where students receive most of their knowledge directly from the teacher, remaining mostly just observers. So this type of learning approach belongs to the student-centered learning curriculum. So what is the motivation and environment of Eastern education system? So the Eastern education system is mainly built around the authoritarian teacher and student relations. So the professor's opinion is undeniable, and in most cases, discussions are not simply conducted. So as for evaluation and promotion, the focus is on errors. So it is believed that a critical attitude towards mistakes motivates one to study harder. So the motivation in Eastern education system is based on the errors of the student, because they believe that through evaluating that errors, the students will strive harder and develop more as an individual. So how learning itself is seen as a mean to an end in Eastern world. So Eastern systems often instill moral value in education. So that is their center in the education system. So in China in particular, students follow the learning tradition founded by Confucius, who emphasized the vital role of education in bringing honor to oneself, family, and society. So how can we distinguish an Eastern student? So Eastern students particularly view sheer effort as the primary way to do exceptionally well in school. So Eastern schools instill the belief that discipline can outweigh any academic difficulty, discrediting any factors that may affect student performance. So in the East, every student is equal. They are given equal opportunities for learning. So failure in academics then fall mainly on their shoulders or credited to their parents. So in Eastern education system, the schools are implementing equality to all students, where students are all given attention and guidance. But at the end of the day, if a student is not willing to learn, then he or she will not learn at all. So this philosophy in the Eastern world based on the performance of the students, if they fail or not. So at this time, we are going to discuss the education system across Eastern countries. So first to tackle is Russia. So in Russia, general education has 3 stages. These are the primary education, which lasts for 4 years. So the basic general education lasting for 5 years. Then secondary education, which lasts for 2 to 3 years. So the general education normally consists of 34 weeks of study per year and 27 to 36 hours of study per week. So you can see here in the picture that their typical uniform in Russia. So next, let's move on to New Zealand. So in New Zealand, your child's education is free between the age of 5 and 9 at state schools. So schooling in New Zealand is only compulsory from age 6 to 16. So the New Zealand's education system has 3 levels. First is the early childhood education, which is from birth to school entry age. Next is primary and secondary education from 5 to 19 years. So in primary education, it will focus on the foundation learning across a range of subjects and competencies, especially in literacy and numeracy. So further education encompasses of 2 phases, the higher and vocational education. So all in all, the education in New Zealand for schools is made up of 13 years. So many children go to a school close to where they live in New Zealand. So this type of enrollment scheme is called zoning. So zoning refers to if you live in an area close to a school or the school zone, your child is guaranteed to get a place at that school. And if you want your child to go to a school outside the area where you live, you may have to apply and place isn't guaranteed. So let's move on to state integrated or private schools. So most schools in New Zealand are owned and founded by the state. So state integrated schools refers to those schools with special character. They are funded in the government and teaching national curriculum. They have their own sets of aims and objectives to reflect their own particular values and morals, set within a specific philosophy or religion. You will pay compulsory attendance for the dues. So, Maure medium education, or also known as Kura Kwa Papa Maure. Maure medium education is where students are taught all or some curriculum subjects in the Maure language for at least 51% of the time. So this can be also referred to as the Maure language immersion, which has the levels of 1 to 2. So another educational program is Te Aho o Te Kura Paunamo, or also known as Te Kura. So Te Kura teaches early childhood, primary, secondary, and special needs students using multimedia and online learning. So your child can also study 1 or 2 courses if a subject they want to study isn't available at their school. Okay. So in Japan, let's move on to Japan, guys. So a little fun fact on the education system of Japan. So Japan is on one of the world's best educated populations with 100% enrollment in compulsory grades and 0 illiteracy. So the basic school system in Japan is composed of elementary school, which lasts for 6 years, middle school, which lasts for 3 years, high school, which encompasses of 3 years, and finally university for 4 years. So education is compulsory only for the 9 years of elementary and middle school, but 98.8% of students go on to high school. So by law in Japan, each child must have 9 years of compulsory education, from primary 6 years to junior high school secondary, which is 3 years. So a little fun fact, in Japan, students don't get any exams until they reach grade. Let's move on to another Eastern country, which is China. So the basic education in China includes preschool education, which is usually lasts for 3 years, primary education 6 years, usually starting the age of 6, and secondary education for 6 years. So academic secondary education consists of junior, which lasts for 3 years, and senior middle schools, which also last for 3 years. So secondary education has 2 routes. It can be at academic secondary education, which mainly focus on the academic field of the students, like their intelligence or their knowledge. So the other one is on the applying the skills, which is the specialized vocational or technical education, where a student can apply his or her learnings in the real scenario. So in India, the school system in India has 4 levels. The first one is the lower primary, which age to 6 to 10. Then upper primary, 11 and 12. High, 13 to 15. And higher secondary, 17 and 18. So students throughout the country have to learn 3 languages. And it is compulsory in India. And these languages are English, Hindi, and their mother tongue. So let's move on to Indonesia. Education in Indonesia is compulsory and provided free of charge at public schools from grades 1 to 9, which lasts for 6 years of elementary education and 3 years of junior secondary education. So the official age of entry is 7. But many pupils enter at the age of 6. So like here in the Philippines, guys, it is very common that the age limit is a basis if you will mupursu ba ka sa next or sa grade 1. But most of us, naiuban nga, even if they are just 5 years old, but their birth month falls on the 2nd semester of the year, then masud na sila anang grade. So the Indonesian government plans to extend compulsory education to grade 12. So nag-plan pa day sila, guys. So wala pa siguro sila K to 12. But these plans have not yet been implemented due to the associated costs and other reasons. So next is Australia. So school education or primary and secondary school in Australia is compulsory between the ages of 6 and 16. So parehas ang Australia and New Zealand na compulsory from age 6 to 16. So this encompasses in the year 1 to year 9 or year 10. So school education is 13 years and divided into primary school, which runs for 7 or 8 years, starting at kindergarten, preparatory, through the year 6 or 7. And then the secondary school runs for 3 or 4 years, from years 7 to 10 or 8 to 10, depend on the age of the student. And then the senior secondary school runs for 2 years, in the years 11 and 12. So let's move on to Vietnam. Children normally start primary school at Vietnam at the age of 6, which lasts for 5 years and is compulsory for all students. So education in Vietnam is a state-run system of public and private education run by the Ministry of Education and Training. And it is divided into 5 levels. The first is the preschool, second is primary school, followed by secondary school, high school, and the higher education. So Vietnam, pare-pareha ang Vietnam and the Philippines. Like we have preschool, primary school, secondary school, high school, and higher education. So formal education consists of 12 years of basic education. So the primary education curriculum in Vietnam is divided into 2 phases. So the phase 1 encompasses of grades 1, 2, and 3, has 8 subjects. And then the phase 2, which encompasses of grades 4 and 5, which has 11 subjects. So the secondary education includes 6th, 7th, and 8th, and 9th grade, where students have to pass the IGE, or shall I say, intermediate graduation examination, to proceed to higher education in Vietnam. So as we've tackled the different education systems in the Eastern world, I can say that the structures of the education system really varies between nations and also occasionally depends on what state or region you belong. So at this juncture, I'm going to leave you a quote. Education gives us an understanding of the world around us and offer us an opportunity to use that knowledge wisely. Thank you.